Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Mastermind Monday. As always, I enjoy getting to start my week off with you coaches. I appreciate your time. And what I want to do today, as always, is drive value to your students, to your businesses, and to your facility. And to do that, what I want to do is spend some time talking about a system that you can implement in your golf game, that you can implement for your students, that I think will drive down scores massively. I've seen huge success in it, and I'm excited to share it today with you. So, as always, let's start off with grabbing a pen and paper or your iPad, or whether it's even on your phone. But it's important to take notes, be sure to fire in questions as well, and then most importantly, obviously take action on it, get out there and actually do these things. So, for me today, I want to talk about, this idea of this insane shipping method that I learned, and it's nothing new. And many of you are going to go, well, I've heard of that before. But for me, it made a huge change probably, I'm not sure, maybe 10 years ago when I first learned it and I was showed it by somebody. And it really made a huge difference. And it changed the way I thought about the game of golf as well. And I'm going to kind of talk to you about that today, in starting to understand how we learn and also how we can simplify the game. And so to start with, as always, we want to start off with a question. So my question to all of you today is, what do you find drives down scores the most for your players? So as always, in the chat box, let's go ahead and put that in there. Let's say hi right here. Let's go ahead and give you some examples right here. So for example, do you find that putting is the most important thing that drives down scores? Is it chipping? Is it pitching? Do you find it being iron play, tee shots, or possibly something else? Is it just course management? You might ask, well, what type of level of player? I suppose what I'm asking you really is, what are you seeing in the students that you're teaching that drives down the score the most? So let's all just go in there in the chat box, if you could, please, and go ahead and fire in putting distance, control, and course management. Kevin, that's a great one. Yeah, lag putting distance, I think that's a vitally important one for sure. Jerome, aiming and course management. Yeah, absolutely. I think those are two keys right there. There's no wrong answer, by the way, to this. I just, getting to know kind of where you are as a coach. So let's go ahead and see a few more people enter them in if we could. Putting, chipping, pitching, 50 yards and closer. Yeah, I think that's a huge one for sure. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in here and start to talk to you about, for me, what it was all about was understanding the numbers. Course management, hitting the shot they think they should, not what they think they can. That's a good one there, Corey. So what I found was that if I started to understand what was important in golf, it was going to help me to be a better coach. And so to me, the biggest thing is distance is the number one thing in golf. Okay, now you might all be thinking, well, we weren't exactly expecting that from you, that distance would be the number one thing. But when you see the second part of it, distance of your first putt is the most important thing in golf to me. Okay, so a lot of people, I love to sort of tease them, I need more distance, I need more distance. And I said, you need less distance, you need less distance on your first putt. Because to me, if you look at the data, it's really where you can get buy-in from your students. And I'm talking about high school kids, especially boys that don't even believe in you, even though their parents are paying you and that you play professional golf and that you can beat them hands down, they still believe that they know the answers. So what we've got to do is help them to understand who their heroes are and what their heroes do, so we can start to use actual data to help them to realize what they should work on in their game. So the first one that I love to show them is the one putt probability. And so just asking my students, how many putts do they make from inside of 3 feet? And the honest answer is they don't miss inside of 3 feet. That's just the data. And as they move further away from the hole, these are on the best putting surfaces in the world, okay, with the best putting strokes in the world. By the time you get to 7, 8, 9 feet, you're not making, this is tour players, right? LPGA and PGA tour players, you're not making putts from that distance. And honestly, when you're getting out there around about 20 to 25 feet, a lot of them are actually 3-putting more often than they're 1-putting. And so for me, it was to start to understand how to get this data across to them, to let them realize that it wasn't that they missed the 7-foot putt and they should be frustrated. It's that they chipped it to 7 feet. The other thing that I've got to remind them of is that if you think about a tour player, and this is what blows my mind, right, is that when you look at them, they average, let's just say they're averaging 69. Okay, so they're 3 under par. But with that said, they're only hitting 13 greens around. So that means they're 3 under par for the 13 greens that they hit, which means they have to be even par for the holes that they don't hit. So let's just say they're 4 under, right, for the 13 holes, and they're 1 over for those 5 holes they missed. So when we see scrambling stats, especially for our better players, and they say, well, scrambling is the percentage, that's when they hit it out of bounds off the tee box. That's still including scrambling. That's when they plugged it in the face of a bunker, or if they're in the US Open in thick rough. When they're chipping and pitching around the green, they're not far from the hole. And so if we can go ahead and, you're all welcome to snapshots of this on the screen right here, but if we're able to show them this data and realize that when they're under 10 yards from the hole off of the green, that they're averaging, the best player on the tour is averaging 2.5 feet from the hole. Now, if you think about that, I mean, how impactful is that? That basically you're going to be making every single one of those putts, whereas the person who's 100th on tour is pretty much close to 4 feet. And so now there's a big shift, right? Look at 10 to 20 yards. The average player on tour, also the best player on tour is 4 feet, right? 3 feet, 11 inches. And the 100th player is out there almost 7 feet. So they're dropping strokes and they're only missing 5 greens around. Whereas my high school players, and let's just say my 18 and 24 handicaps, they're missing 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 greens around. So to me, there's an even bigger advantage for the higher handicap golfer, because if we're talking about someone who's a 30 handicap, they're hitting no greens in regulation. So the way you can make up score is that how close can you chip and pitch the ball to the hole? Because if you can do that, you're going to save a ton of strokes. And the best part about it for me as a coach is I can't teach my 32 handicap who's got a bad back, who's 55 years old, who's been playing golf for 3 years. I'm never going to get him to hit the golf ball like a tour player, but I can get him to chip the ball close to the hole from within 20 yards, as good as a scratch golfer. I truly believe that. So I've got to sort of weigh the odds of how good can I get you at putting, lag putting, chipping, pitching versus ball striking. And so this is to me where if we start to understand this concept that distance from the hole is most important, the first putt is what's going to determine how many putts you have. And that's where we can go ahead and once we've explained that data, really make an impact on our players. So with that said, now let's dive into the system. Now, I'm sure many of you on this call have heard of Paul Runyon, okay? The greatest short game, they say, of all time by far. His statistics were at certain years, he actually chipped in more than he didn't get up and down, which I would say is pretty good. So none of what I'm going to tell you right now is from me. This is something that I learned from a coach who understood the score, who understood scoring and who understood what's called the rule of 12. And so to me, the way you chip it close to the hole is help people start to chip the golf ball. I know that sounds really basic or even it doesn't make any sense. But what I see is a lot of players pitch the golf ball to the hole when they should be chipping. Now that means I need to go ahead and clarify what I believe a chip is to a pitch. So to me, a chip shot, okay, is the same movement, basically a putting stroke movement with the same length backswing, but I'm going to change the club. Whereas a pitch shot is you're on the fringe of the green and now you're drawing the club back halfway to maybe 9 o'clock on the clock system like we talked about a while back, and you're trying to gauge distance control through the length of the golf swing. And so when we see our players take a lob wedge and they've got 50 feet of green in front of them, we know they're about to pitch a ball that they could chip. And so what I've got to show them is a system. Now, we've shown them the system. We talked about, Dave Lepore, you talked about the clock system with Dave Peltz and learning how to pitch to a distance. And so what I want to do is simplify it down by giving them an actual method. And this method is called the rule of 12. And I'm sure many of you have heard of it. I hope you have. If not, we're going to dive into it and I'm going to make sure we ask lots of questions. So the rule of 12 is based off this idea of, I would say, simple physics of how the ball will react depending on the loft that you put on it landing on the green. And so the concept here is to actually give our players, instead of I'm going to feel my 9-iron or feel my sand wedge. It's going to be just like you have a club in your hand on the golf course. It's 150 yards. John, how far do you hit a 7-iron? I hit a 7-iron 150. Great. Well, this chip shot, it is a 7-iron chip shot, and let me prove to you why it's a 7-iron chip shot. So you can make the same movement each time with a chip, and the ball will run out the distance you desire. And I'm telling you this, if you've never used this before, when you do it, it's going to freak you out. So the first thing that you've got to do here is some of my sketches here, is we're going to start to understand landing zone. And I think that most people don't really understand the landing zone. You know, they start to pick a target that they feel, hey, I'm going to fly it this far. Well, when I'm under pressure, I don't feel like flying the ball very far, right? Because I feel a bit stiff and tight. So I might speed up a little bit so I put the landing zone closer to me. So what I suggest, or sorry, let me put this, what Paul Runyon taught us, was you go onto the green, approximately 2 paces onto the green, find the flat spot, and that would be your landing zone. So the first thing is that you teach your players it's easier to throw a ball into a bucket 6 feet in front of you than it is 26 feet in front of you. So what we want to do is put a system in place that shows them, here's the front of the green, go a couple paces on, find a zone. And what I do with my players is I have them put a nice big coin down, and I say, that's your landing zone. So that's the first concept. The second part to that is that you now go ahead and you pace off the distance from where you are to that landing zone. So I physically have them walk onto the green from their ball, and they pace out, let's just say for this example, 8 paces. And so I have them then stand where that is, right where this arrow is right now. And sorry, let me undo that one. I stand where the landing zone arrow is. So this is the distance that they're flying it. And I have them feel a putt from that distance. And I just have them literally feel like I'm putting from where that landing zone is to the target. That's what's going to happen. You're going to basically loft the ball onto the green to the landing zone, and then it will run out from there. So all you need now, the next step is to know how many paces it is to the hole. So as you can see here, it's 16 paces to the hole. And what you now do is you work on ratios. You basically work on the ratio of how far the ball will roll based on the club that you pick. So what my players love about this is that they've actually now got a real strategy behind what club they should be picking. And if there was some feel involved, it would be, do I want to de-loft a 9-iron or add a little bit of loft to a 9-iron? Not, should it be a 7-iron or a pitching wedge? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring up one more slide, and then I'm going to open it up for questions, because again, teaching this somebody out on the golf course is a little bit easier, but hopefully this starts to explain to you simply what you're doing here, which is you go to the golf ball, you pace off your landing zone, which is 6 paces in this example. If you take a sand wedge is 1-to-1. So the ball will fly 6 paces, it will roll 6 paces, okay? If you then take a pitching wedge, it will fly 6 paces, it will roll twice the distance. So it's 2-to-1, so it's going to roll out 12 paces. If you go with a 9-iron, it's going to go 3-to-1, so it will roll out. So if you look at the ratios here, you're going to see that. Now I've put a lob wedge in, and I'm going to explain this in a minute, but I'm going to just go ahead and just say, so sand wedge is 1-to-1. Now a lot of you are going to say, but Will, I'm at Augusta, okay? I completely understand. You've got to find greens, let's say, that are rolling around about 9 on the stint meter, which is what it was back in the day that Runyon was playing. And the beauty of this is it works exactly the same, because you find your landing to run ratio. So yes, at Augusta, that might change, but all it will do, it will shift down the ladder that an S wedge might be 2-to-1 because they roll so quickly. Or at a very slow green, it might be a pitching wedge is 1-to-1. But I want you to just take this honestly, that 90% of the greens that I play on when I'm playing golf, this works absolutely amazingly. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And the beauty of it is that as long as, let's just say that they're 5-to-1 out and they take a 7-iron, even if they chunk it, even if they blade it a little bit, at least it's a chipping stroke that will land somewhere close to their landing zone, because it's just in front of them, and it will run out that distance. And so what I want to do now is open this up for questions. If anybody's used this before, had success with it, please chime in and give us this insights. But let's just start talking about how we would coach this. But I'd love some thoughts and feedback first. So let's open it up, and questions from anybody so far on the call. So I'll pick Jerome first, as no one's asking questions, and I want to get into it. So Jerome, you're on the hot seat. Any questions on this?
No, I'm still looking through it.
Okay. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Scott Weiss, I saw you unmute yourself. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. Does it continue on if you go 6 iron and it's going to be 6-1 and on to 5-4?
Exactly. Yeah.
I never saw the system. I think it's phenomenal, but I've been using more of a one pace instead of 2 onto the green and then changing clubs based on roll. But this is so well structured. I think it's easy to explain to a student.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I love about this, if any of you have read Bob Rotella's stories, that I heard that on tour they trialed having a larger hole for 3 tournaments. Did anyone read this in a Bob Rotella book? I think it was in Golf Not Again Perfect. Because Runyon, it was so unfair that Runyon was chipping the ball in so often, and it was basically unfair. So they increased the size of the hole and he won those tournaments, and so they went back to the old version. I mean, this guy literally did not get up and down. Why? Because he took the difficulty of chipping out. He put a structure in place. Imagine just having a 6 iron, I said to my players, and you have to hit every shot. So some you'd finesse and some you'd smash and some you'd hit low and some you'd hit high. Well, that's what you're doing when you put a sand wedge in your hand. Like, yes, there's a time and a place to hit a sand wedge. It's when it's 1-1. But when it's 2-1 or 3-1, you're making it into a pitch, which is more difficult. So what I'm telling my players is when I get over the ball, I'm telling them you're putting with loft. So all I want you to do is feel the putting stroke. So if you look at some of the great chippers, Ray Floyd, I mean, remember how close Ray Floyd used to stand to the ball, right? I mean, his shaft angle was so vertical, his heel was off the ground so that he couldn't basically dump the club in behind it. So he was really chipping with the toe of the club. The vertical, very straight arms. I mean, I'm taking all of the wrist and the hinge and all the troubles out of chipping and getting to get comfortable just hitting that landing zone. And so the beauty of this is that they start to see instant improvement, because I found that nobody has problem with direction, right? They tend to be pretty much square at impact. It's the problem with distance. And so this is where they start to instantly go from struggling with chipping. So I always start someone, they just learn with a hybrid, right? So they chip with a hybrid to start with, and they start to get, even if they're a decent player, I'll teach them how to chip with a hybrid so they can learn distance control. They're also learning that putting stroke feel, and then I'll move into the rule of 12. So what I want to do now, let's just open up for any questions. I want to talk about also how I teach this so it can sort of help you. And again, come back and watch the recording, and also, we'll ask, give you all the answers you want. But does there any questions before I move on to how I teach this? Okay. If you want to unmute at any time. Yeah, Scott?
What did you say about standing on the spot where you wanted the ball to land and then look at that putt? How did that relate to it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Let's put it this way. When I watched Phil Mickelson, I always used to watch him walk onto the green, and I'd see him hit putts. I didn't realize he was standing on his landing zone. So in his mind, when I chip, because I took it from him, when I chip, I'm feeling like I'm going to lob the ball. I'm going to throw the ball to myself standing on the putting green. And I almost feel like I've got my putter in the air like this. And as the ball comes in, I'm going to put it down the fairway. I put it down towards the hole. So when you do that, you literally get on the green and you're reading your chips because they're now putts. And what I see is people get over chipping and they're all tense and tight. And how far do I need to go? And what do I need to do? And do I have the right club? And how far do I need to land it? And is it a pitch or is it a chip? To me, it's simplified to the ball's going to land there and I'm going to putt from there. So I go and stand on that spot and I go, okay, I'll even aim point them. I'll be like, okay, it's 2 off the left. It's 2 cups out on the left. And so now when I'm standing over that chip, I literally feel like I'm putting. I'm putting with loft, right? So my 7 iron is going to loft the ball up in the air just enough to land it on the green and roll it out there. Does that make sense, Scott?
Yeah. So the amount of stroke that you need for that putt, for example, if you imagine that has nothing to do with the chip stroke that you're going to be making.
I think what it does for me is it allows me to feel a putting stroke rather than starting to get long. But no, it's not like how hard I'm going to hit this. With a hybrid, yes. When I get my people to use hybrids when they first learn how to get the ball on the ground, it would be that. But when I'm teaching this type of a player, once they've got to a hybrid and they're chipping, and now they're taking hybrid out of rough, and I've got to go over a bunker, or it's definitely not a club to hit, hey, hybrid's the wrong club. Now I've got to give them these extra tools. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I do is, the first thing I do is I go ahead and set up stations, and I'll have 3 different stations. So again, write this down if it helps. I've been doing this with my high school kids, and I love to say high school because they all hit lob wedge and they all struggle with getting the ball close to the hole. So I'll set up 3 stations, and I'll have one that's basically something that's going to be somewhere around about a sand wedge, one that's going to be around a 9-iron, and one that's going to be about a 7-iron. I want some pretty big gaps in there so they feel the difference. And then what I'll do is I will go, you can take a scorecard and stick it in the ground with a tee, whatever you want to do to make something very clear for them to hit into and land on. And I'll go ahead and I'll give them 3 golf balls. So they get 3 golf balls and 3 tees. So the first thing I'll do is I'll have them throw the ball onto the scorecard. So they're 6 paces off the green, and I want them to throw it onto the scorecard, and wherever it lands, they're going to go and stick a tee in the ground. So can they even throw the ball close to their target, right? And usually they can, and they'll have 3 tees on it, right? The second thing is it's rolling out 1-to-1, so they're starting to feel there's more loft on this one. And they go round the stations. Remember, my players, even my adults, right? I'll have 8 adults, and they'll all be playing these games, right? And so they're throwing that one, and it's landing, and it's running like a 7-iron. So they're feeling how it impacts when the ball lands at a different trajectory, it will roll out. So I just want them to throw it first. And then what I do is I have them go and chip those 3 balls. And after each one, they have to land and stick the tee in the ground. Now, the beauty is this. When they hit that, let's just say they're going 1-to-1 sand wedge, and it lands 5 feet past, they stick a tee in the ground, what they'll usually find is they will walk to the flag and then walk about 5 or 6 feet past the hole, and there's their golf ball. If they land 3 feet short of their target, the ball's going to come up about 3 feet short of their target. And so what's beautiful about this is they start to realize, like, well, it's the same as if you hit it a little bit heavy with a sand wedge from 100 yards, it's going to end up a little bit short of the hole. And if you catch it a little bit too strong, it's going to go past the hole. And so it really starts to show them that it's narrowing their miss down. So if they have 3 that hit the scorecard or right on the scorecard, their golf ball will be out there pretty much right by the hole. So the first part is help them to understand the landing zone and how to hit that landing zone, okay? So any questions on this so far as I go into that first part of identify the landing zone 2 paces on? The reason why I say, Scott, 2 paces is that if they go 1 pace, most people I find under tension tighten up and the ball comes up short, and now they hit the collar of the green or they hit the rough. So Runyon was talking about 2 paces on, and Dave, who's looking at this, will pick up on this instantly because Dave Lepore just joined us. So I pick 2 paces on, so I have them hit to that landing zone and start to play 3 different ones where they see sand wedge, 9-iron, 7-iron, all with the same stroke, right? Just a very simple, more of an upright putting stroke. So any questions on this before I move on to that second step? Okay, all right. I must be explaining this well. So, or everyone's totally confused and too embarrassed to say anything, okay? It's probably the latter. So now they've got their landing zone, okay, and they've got the club and they've got the landing zone. Now what I've got to do is start to help them on their ball contact. Because what we'll find is I'm going to have the scooper who's going under it and says, it just doesn't roll out. I'm hitting my 9-iron and my 9-iron's coming up 25 feet short. Well, their 9-iron at impact has added loft and it's scooping to a sand wedge. And we go out there, we roll it 1-to-1. And so at impact, they're not repeating the strike each time. You've then got the player who's been taught, play it off the back foot, crank the hands forward, and he's stabbing down and his sand wedge is coming off like a 2-iron. It's landing on his landing zone and running off the back of the green. And he's saying, this just doesn't work, you know? And what you're looking to do is saying, well, if you took a 7-iron from 150 yards and you played it 4 feet back, 4 inches back off your back foot and cranked your hands forward, it wouldn't come off like that. So this is just a mini version of a full golf swing. And if you scooped under a 7-iron out of rough, it wouldn't go very far. So the next part is to help them to get neutral chipping. And again, neutral chipping to me would be that the ball's positioned towards the back of the stance, the hands are pressed slightly forward, and you're not trying to break the wrist. You're staying quite rigid. And they're starting to see that now that they can hit their landing zone, can they repeat the trajectory that they're getting, which is based on ball strike? And so it becomes such a fun game because they only get 3. So they've got to be specific on each shot. They've got 3 stations to go around. So I usually have 2 people on each station. So that's my 6 players, right? They'll have 3 tees in their hand. So they're being very deliberate. They're very focused on their landing zone. They're landing. I don't really care where the ball ends up. That will be based on the club you selected and did you hit your landing zone? And then finally, was your contact right? So they're starting to pick the right targets. They're moving from station to station. And then this is where, again, you'll just see very quickly the proximity get narrower and narrower and narrower. And so once they've got this concept, what I leave with is this, and this is kind of what I would say is the secret sauce, because again, if we look at the scoring method, our belief is if you increase tension, you decrease skill sets. So what's a great way to increase tension? Confuse somebody, right? Give them a ton of stuff to think about, right? So when I tell this to my players, I don't tell them why it's called the rule of 12. The reason why it's called the rule of 12 is because there wasn't lob wedges in the bag back in the day. And so you took 12 and if it was 1-to-1, okay, you minus 1 and it got down to an 11, which was a sand wedge, and then 2, which is a 10, which is a pitching wedge, and then a 9, and then an 8. So that's why it's called the rule of 12, but I don't tell them that. What I do is I tell them, walk to where you want to land it. 1, 2, 3, and I don't care what their paces are. If they've got the widest stride in the world and one person is 3 and the other person took 11 to get it, it's not yards, it's how many paces you're going to walk before the ball and after the ball. So it doesn't need to be, you don't measure a yardstick on this. It took that person 7 paces to get to my 6 paces. Who cares? What I then say is you walk onto the green, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sand wedge, because that's your first club to go to. It's a 1-to-1. So when they get to sandwich, even though they're the target, let's just say on this one, is out at target 3, when they get to 7 and 7, they say sandwich. 8, or they can now get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, pitching wedge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because 7's their number, 9. So really what you're trying to do is instead of them having to do the math of 12 minus the number is, what's the distance between the ball and where you're going to land it? 6. Okay, great. It's 6. Now, each time you get to 6, the first one you're going to say is sandwich. That's 1-to-1. The second time you get to 6. So if it was 24, right, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sandwich. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pitching wedge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As you get to 6, right, it would be 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, 6 4s are 24. I'm at 8. It's an 8 time. And very quickly they pick up on this, and the guys that go, "Oh, this is too difficult." I'm like, "Well, what do you hit from 145 yards uphill into the wind?" 7-iron. Well, you just did that, didn't you? So this is a lot easier because it's right there in front of you. So it's a simple system for them to be able to implement it, that they can pace it off. And even if they get it wrong, let's just by mistake they say 7-iron instead of an 8-iron. They have 24 paces between the fringe and the hole. They're going to do better with a 7-iron than they would have done with a sand wedge or a lob wedge anyway. So it allows them with the chipping technique to get it a lot closer to the hole. So let's just open this up to begin with, just to wrap up, to finish. Does anyone have any questions? Does everybody see, how this works? And do you feel that, take a snapshot of this, that you can go and implement this with your players? Thoughts, questions before we wrap up here?
I have a question, Will.
Yes, Blake, yes.
So can you just go over again, if, say for instance, it's because 2 questions. One, what if you got like a fairway in front of you, if you want them to they're say 20 paces off, right? And they're better chipping with an 8-iron than they are with a sand wedge. At that part, are you doing the same thing, or are you basically talking about feel at that point?
Yeah, that's the whole thing is that when they start with chipping, as they move back, I want feel to be the nuance of, okay, it's not 2-to-1. Okay, so I've got 15 paces to get to my landing, or 20 paces to get to my landing zone on the green, and I've got 24 paces slightly uphill. So it's just past 1-to-1. Do you want to de-loft a sand wedge? Says Dave Lepore just made a great comment I want to add in here. Or you could take a pitching wedge because you're someone that lofts the ball a little bit higher in the air. So it's actually easier for you because it's just less than 3-1. So it's the concept, and what David wrote here, because it will help, is don't forget about the gap wedge, 5 degree increments on wedges. So and this is another reason why doing the ratios is difficult, because someone says, well, I've got a lob wedge, sand wedge, pitching wedge, gap wedge, pitching, and you're like, oh my goodness, every club you have has about 5 degrees of gap. That's why I say 1, 2, 3, 4 sand wedge, 5, 6, gap wedge, pitching wedge. So it helps not to actually try and tell them 12 minus that club to the ratio. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm not trying to get too technical, but David made the exact thing. Everyone say, I have a gap wedge. Well, realistically, your gap wedge is an old pitching wedge, right? But that they keep on cranking clubs down so TaylorMade can get you to hit the ball further. So that's where I would say whatever clubs they have in their bag, their 1-to-1 is their sand wedge if it's around about 55 degrees. And then they break down from there. So again, coming back to yours there, Blake, that's where I'd be saying to them, the minute you have to get to a place where you're hinging the club and going longer, you're probably in a pitch now, and it might be easier for you to fly the ball to the hole. I found with my 18 to 20 handicap, this is a lot easier for them to land a pitching wedge on the front of the green and get it to run all the way back there. So I think it's as they progress back, they'll start to see where pitching comes in, and that's where I would want them to pick up on. Okay, well, if you go back to 9 o'clock with your sand wedge, you fly at 35 yards. Well, now that they can actually go ahead and start pitching the ball. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So with this, everybody, what I would suggest you do is go and check out, Paul Runyon, Rule of 12. Go and look at it. I will get Courtney for those of you, with RGX. What I'll show you here is this is the lesson book that I've got so let me see. So this is Will Robbins golf right here. So this is what I give my high school kids and stuff like this. So these are all the stats for the tour. This is the stepping. So I print this out for my players so they have this, and then I have them go through that. So any of you that are in RGX, just go ahead and ask Courtney. She'll fire this over to you because you'll see it's in the advanced coaching lesson plans. So again, for those of you that haven't used this before, go and check it out. Go and put it to work. And then for those of you that haven't yet, reached out to us at RGX, that, you might want help with how to coach, how to get better results for your players, better results for your business, please reach out to us. Hop on a call with us, go and check out the website. Let's get on a call. Let's talk. Let's help you out. But most importantly, get out there this week and start to try it yourself, because it is transformational. It will freak you out. Pick a chip shot that's uphill all the way up a tier, right? And it's 40 paces onto the green. And then again, if it's uphill, it's 4-1, right? But it's uphill, so it's going to play a little bit more because it's just like playing into the wind or playing uphill on a golf course. So you say, it's about 5-1. And you go ahead and you take out your 7-iron, you land it, and you hit 3 balls, and one's a foot short, one's 3 feet past, and one's right by the hole. And you're just like, oh my goodness, it is just an amazing way to start to simplify chipping. So go and put this into action. As always, everybody, I greatly appreciate your time. Have an amazing week, and we'll catch you next week.